Hello, we're going to continue our discussion on organizational culture, focusing on individual work and organizational components of motivation that affect organizational culture. So starting with individual components, the biggest difference in employees and individuals is what motivates them. Intrinsic motivation comes from within, and it's usually driven by individuals' needs to do something for themselves. Each person has unique desires. They may want to learn a language or skill, or reach a goal of finishing a 5K in a certain amount of time. Intrinsic motivation is the reason why people climb mountains. Extrinsic motivation comes from an external source. People may work a second or third job because they need additional money to pay the bills. Children may apologize to another child for not sharing their toys to avoid punishment from their parents. An individual's view of these intrinsic and extrinsic motivational factors is impacted by previous experience, current needs, gender, and personal and cultural values. Older workers indicate company loyalty as a motivational factor, but younger workers, who are more likely to move around, are motivated by job flexibility and challenging work. Cultural differences can fall into play as well. European countries value vacation time and use quite a bit, while in the United States, workers sometimes don't even use the days they've been given. As individuals' personality can affect his or her perception of how effort leads to performance. Two personality aspects are particularly important in this scenario: locus of control and self-esteem. Locus of control is people's perception of who has control over their lives, their environment, and external events. People who have an internal locus of control feel that their successes and failures are largely due to their own efforts, knowledge, and choices. People with an external locus of control feel that external factors have an undue influence on their current situation. There's a spectrum of internal versus external locus of control, and people can be very high on one end or the other, or fall somewhere in between. People with a high internal locus tend to be more task-oriented because they feel they're in control of their own success. People with a high external locus credit luck, people in higher leadership positions, or divine powers for their successes or failures, and they tend to be more reactive to issues. Locus of control is a fairly stable personality trait, though significant external factors can influence it. Self-esteem interacts with motivation in a very similar way to locus of control. People with a high self-esteem tend to feel that their performance is linked to their own efforts. The opposite is often true for people who have lower self-esteem. Managers need to understand these personality differences in their employees if they're going to help them build the necessary links between effort and performance, and they can do this via encouragement and regular feedback for those that bring an external locus of control or low self-esteem to the team. Older approaches to understanding employee motivation focused almost solely on needs, and the more we learn, the more we find that those early approaches aren't necessarily accurate. This doesn't mean that an employee's needs don't factor into motivation, because they do. Needs are very individual, and they're not necessarily all filled by a paycheck and health benefits. The work an individual does holds tremendous motivational power. But as we discussed, no two individuals are alike, and no two individuals are motivated by the same things. A manager's challenge when it comes to manipulating the work components of motivation is to assemble work that is challenging and rewarding. They can do that by designing jobs that fit employees' skills and interests, providing training and good working conditions, and setting challenging but attainable goals. Let's take a look at each of these areas. What kind of skills do I need to do this job? How important is this job to the success of the organization? These are the answers an employee seeks before they agree to accept a job with an organization. Individuals are looking for interesting work that will foster positive internal feelings. Those feelings might come in the form of achieving high production, overcoming obstacles, or being innovative and coming up with new ideas that help the organization succeed. The right job design can help a manager get to those intrinsic motivations an individual brings to work each day, rather than just the extrinsic factors like pay and benefits. When reviewing Vroom's expectancy framework, we can see that job design affects both the effort to performance piece and the performance to outcome piece. The question managers look to answer is, what's the right balance for the job design? Early management theorists suggest that the easier the job, the more motivated the employee would be. Later studies suggested that organizations should make jobs more challenging and interesting. Both of these points of view fail to take into consideration individuals and the factors each person brings that might influence whether a job design is motivating to them personally. Skill variety refers to the number of skills used to do a job. A traditional assembly line job would have a low skill variety, whereas a nurse would have higher skill variety. Task identity refers to the level at which employees feel like they owns the outcome when completing the task. Going back to our first example, workers on an assembly line would have low task identity. Which parts from their lines ended up with which machines? They're not likely to know, so they would have a low task identity. A nurse, however, can identify with how well a patient recovers, or see immediately that a choice they made saved the life of a patient. Thus, a nurse would have high task identity. Task significance indicates the importance of that task to the organization. The job of receptionist, for example, has lower task significance. A temporary employee can be brought in to answer phones and sort mail, but doctors would have high task significance. Not anyone can do their job, and they have knowledge of their patients and their situations that others would not have. Autonomy is the degree to which an employee can make independent decisions and not have to check in with a supervisor. Again, clerical work would have low autonomy because the job is repetitious and workers make few decisions on their own. Doctors would have high autonomy, making decisions to medicate a patient a certain way or handle an emergency procedure on the operating table. Feedback is information about an employee's performance. Most employees who perform a task want to know if they're doing it right, doing it well, and so on. Hackman and Oldman noted that while the first three components of the job design, skill variety, task identity, and task significance, are very important, the last two, autonomy and feedback, are considered even more so. Thus, managers should think a little harder about how to incorporate a little autonomy and feedback into the role their team members fill. Managers can increase motivation by providing adequate and ongoing training for their employees, letting employees learn new things about their current job, and learn new skills that will help them move on to the next level of their careers. Knowledgeable employees feel good about themselves, and their coworkers feel good about working with them. Tasks get done quickly, and the team is more productive. Employees are motivated when they're set on the path toward a particular goal. Goal setting is essential in the effort-performance link on the expectancy framework. Management by objective focuses on setting goals, monitoring progress, and giving feedback and correction. Management by objective assumes that employees must have clear, challenging, measurable, and specific goals to be motivated to perform well. The goals should be achievable and reasonable, specific and measurable. Employees want to understand exactly what's expected of them, and they want to be able to achieve the goal set. After all, if it's near to impossible to achieve the goal that's been set, an employee might not even try. That can be a demotivator. The goals should also have a reasonable time frame. If it takes a week to build a toy, an employee who's charged with building 50 toys needs to be given more than 6 months to do the work. Conversely, that same employee shouldn't be given 2 years to make that goal, because the work can be done more quickly than that. Job design, training, and working conditions and goal setting are all equally important parts of the work component of motivation, and a good manager understands how to manipulate these things in order to inspire their employees to work hard and feel good about what they've accomplished. Fortune magazine counts down every year the top 100 best companies to work for. How do they arrive at the list? This is right from their site. Great Place to Work measures companies on the following characteristics: Great Place to Work for all, executive team effectiveness, innovation, and people-focused programs. In a Great Place to Work for all, employees report high levels of trust, credible and respectful leadership, pride in the work, and camaraderie. We also look to see that employees consistently experience this great workplace regardless of who they are or what they do. So just what makes a great company? If you look at employee quotes, a few things quickly rise as common elements of good organizations. Let's take a look at how each of these elements can impact employee motivation. As we learned earlier, culture encompasses values and behaviors that contribute to the unique social and psychological environment of a business. It's an organization's personality. A good organizational culture might, in itself, not be a primary motivator, but an organization that fosters teamwork and encourages team members to mind their own well-being is certainly planting the seeds for individual motivation. Conversely, an organization filled with gossip and negative company politics can be a demotivator for its employees. Employees working for an organization that has this kind of culture might foster distrust for others and even create an atmosphere that contributes to lack of productivity. This can have an adverse effect on the performance outcome link of the expectancy framework. These are quotes from employees at two different companies, but they both speak to the same thing: people. Leaders and coworkers can be an important element in the organization component of motivation. Leaders who support their employees and adopt or even live the company's mission are setting the stage for a strong effort to performance and performance to outcome link in the expectancy framework. And at the same time, they're building a supportive organizational culture. Strong leaders also build trust, as an employee needs to trust in their leader to provide feedback and direction in their job. A great team also supports motivation, as indicated in the second quote. Coworkers who support and encourage one another can be very motivating, and team members are often even motivated to do the work for one another. A great set of coworkers means looking forward to going to work each day. On the other side of that coin, poor leaders and coworkers can be demotivating. A team member might look to a leader or coworker for advice, and they have to trust that the advice will be good and honest. Coworkers who are not trustworthy may be out to sabotage you for their own gain. A poor leader might not give feedback or provide direction, and then tear down an employee who thought they were doing a good job. None of these situations motivate an employee to do good work. The idea of equity in a company, or an employee's perception of equity, is perhaps the most important element of the organizational component. For instance, this employee is quoted as saying that all employees have amazing benefits, but if something were to go wrong for a member of the organization, the whole company comes together to show support. That's not only an illustration of supportive coworkers, but it's an illustration of equity. Everyone gets treated the same. Equity is an individual sense that everyone within the company is being treated fairly. Most of the time, equity appeals to the extrinsic elements of a person's motivation, and that they feel their efforts and skills are being compensated with salary and benefits and other things the company offers. When employees feel as though they are putting in more than they're getting, there's a sense of inequity, and that adversely affects the performance to outcome link in the expectancy framework. When a perception of inequity exists, a manager has to respond with hard facts and data that support equity. For instance, if people believe they are not being paid fairly for their work, a report showing average salaries for similar jobs in their geographical areas may change their minds and restore their perceptions of equity. Culture and politics, leaders and workers, and equity, while they may not stand alone in motivating employees to do a great job, they certainly build a foundation for great work to happen. Everyone wants to work for one of those Fortune 100 great companies to work for, and that's because they have the organization component of motivation figured out.